Okay guys, so it is finally here, and that of course, as you can see, is the new CURADO MGL 70. Now, this reel has kind of really not gotten much attention. You know, Shimano, I guess they kind of briefly announced it at this year's online ICAST, but there was no promotional videos, at least that I know of. There were no real pictures other than, you know, the same 2 or 3 that were very unflattering online. So yeah, it's kind of been a mystery, and we really didn't know when it was going to come out, but I was able to get my hands on one, and let's do the unboxing. Alright, so typical Shimano, got your schematics, bubble wrap, oil, of course. As you can see, the box is pretty much just like the old box, which I have right here. That really didn't change, but let's throw all this off to the side. We'll pull this reel out. Now the pictures online, the very few pictures, were very unflattering for this reel, but let's see what it looks like in real life. Alright, take a look at that. This has definitely got the color scheme and the feel of the CURADO K. It's kind of got like this soft matte finish. You can see it's got the green spool tension, but it's got the MGL logo. There's that MGL spool. It's all black. And yes, it is two-tone in the fact that it looks like the front is black while the rest of the body, I don't know, I guess a lighter shade of black. But let me let you guys take a good look at this thing. Give it a good once over. Once again, this is the XG model. But yeah, so far so good, very smooth. All right, let me inspect this thing, and I will be right back. Okay guys, so in case you were wondering, this is not an all new reel. This is what I call a mid-cycle refresh of the CURADO 70. So it's very similar to what Shimano did with the ALDEBARAN, but unlike the lazy effort they put into the ALDEBARAN, this new CURADO MGL 70 has quite a few changes. And these changes were aimed at doing 2 things. And the first thing is to increase the power of the CURADO 70 platform. And then also, on the opposite end of the spectrum, they also wanted to increase the already impressive finesse capabilities of the CURADO 70. So that's going to be a pretty tough task. Now, of course, to illustrate these changes a little bit better, I'm going to bring out the old model. Here's the old CURADO 70 that it's replacing. And we're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to bring out the previous finesse CURADO. And this is my really old CURADO 50, which I have customized pretty heavily, as you can see. And I'm going to put that over here. And let's go over these changes. Now, of course, the first obvious change was the color. And they went with a Shimano 200K type color scheme. So you have a very dark grayish black color for the frame and the side plates, and then you have a black front nose piece. Now, unfortunately, my CURADO K is in storage right now, so I don't have that to show you guys a comparison. But instead of the glossy finish of the previous reel, they went with that satiny matte finish, which I prefer the gloss, but Shimano's satiny matte finishes are very pleasant to hold in hand. But as you can see, they are the exact same frame and body. So that means you have an aluminum frame and graphite side plates. And I was hoping that they would give us, you know, a aluminum handle side plate, but it is graphite. Now with this new model, Shimano has upped the bearing count to 8+1 versus 5+1 with the old model, but we're going to get more into that later. Now one of the main things Shimano did to increase the power of this new MGL 70 was to give it a much bigger handle and knob assembly. So as you can see there, it is a lot beefier compared to the old model. The handle is noticeably longer and the knobs are definitely bigger. And the handle itself is just a lot beefier, while, you know, with the CURADO 70, they pretty much gave this reel the exact same handle and knob assembly that comes on all three of their bait finesse reels. So there have been some people who think that the CURADO 70, you know, was lacking in power. I don't find that to be the case. It's just that this really small handle and knob assembly can't really transfer a lot of your cranking power into the gears. So they've definitely changed that with the new model. Now I have the XG model, and I'm not sure if the handle is longer for this model versus the slower gear model or not. Now speaking of gears, there's a slight change in gear ratios. The XG now is a 8.1 versus 8.2 for the old model, which I have. And then the 7 gear ratio is now a 7.4 versus a 7.2. I'm not sure why they changed that. And another thing they changed was the star drag is now, I guess, more of a standard Shimano baitcaster star drag. It is retro swept, and I think it's the same drag star you'll find on the 200K. And as you can see, they gave it that dark green coloring. Now with the old CURADO 70, it had more of a finesse drag star. And they have also changed the spool tension, and this is a definite upgrade in my opinion. Not only does it say MGL, but it definitely looks a lot better and higher end, and it feels better to turn. Now of course it doesn't click, but it is very smooth. Now I thought that the banding around here was going to be gold like the CURADO K, but it's actually more of a silver color. But it's definitely an upgrade over the old reel that had this very plain looking, you know, root beer brown spool tension. Now another big change was the inclusion of micro module gears. Now I'm pretty sure they're brass, but yeah, the new reel is very smooth. Now the old reel was pretty smooth as well, but we're going to go more into that later. Now another thing they did on paper to increase the power capabilities of the MGL 70 was to up the drag to 12 pounds versus 10. And they did that with the use of one of their cross carbon washers. Now I know that's still pretty low by today's standards, but it's still an upgrade nonetheless. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how they improved the finesse capabilities. And of course, that is the inclusion of the MGL spool. As you can see, it's black, it's kind of plain looking. There's no kind of color anodization, which is kind of disappointing. But that means we're gonna have to pull the scale out and get some weights. Okay, so I got the scale out, and Shimano does let us know that there is a pretty significant weight increase for the new model over the old model by nearly half an ounce. Now the old model is supposed to weigh about 6.5 ounces, and on the scale it is a little bit heavier at 6.6. Now the new model is supposed to weigh about 6.9, and picking them up one after the other, I don't feel that much of a difference. So let's see what the scale says. Okay, 6.942 on the dot. So they did meet the stated weight there. But let me show you guys something. This is the old Curado 50. Of course, it's got aftermarket parts, but that reel is 6.9 ounces as well. Okay, so let's talk about this spool before we pull the spools out and weigh them. Now, in case you didn't know, Shimano also introduced the much cheaper SLX MGL as well. And that's kind of confusing for me because the spool on the SLX MGL was already pretty light. And I was wondering if they were going to give this reel an even lighter spool, maybe give it the same weight, maybe make it a little bit heavier. But now we're going to find out. Okay, so I got the spools out, and let's compare the old spool with the new one. As you can see, the old spool actually looks better in my opinion because it's got the nice gold accents, which they should have given this new spool those gold accents, but oh well. But as you can see, the new spool's got the MGL porting on the side, and the ports in the middle are actually bigger than the old model as well. But they are the exact same dimensions at 32 by 22. They are the exact same line capacity as well, so there's no advantage of one over the other. They look pretty similar in the spool shaft as well, so I'm thinking that you can actually swap spools out from one to the other. But holding them in hand, the new one does feel significantly lighter. Now the old spool was actually surprisingly heavy at about 15.5 grams if I recall, but it doesn't hold much line. But the reason I bring that up is because for such a heavy spool, this spool was very fast, and it kind of made the Curado 70 almost unruly. Alright, so let's get to the nitty gritty and get some weights. Okay, so the old spool weighs in at 15.54 grams, just like I remember. And the new spool weighs in at, oh damn, 12.73 grams. Let me weigh that again. Yep, 12.73 grams. So you're looking at a massive weight decrease there by almost 3 grams for the new spool. So that answers the question, if Shimano was going to make this spool lighter or heavier or the same as the cheaper SLX MGL, and they made it quite a bit lighter. Now the SLX MGL spool weighs in I think at 13.2 grams, but I'm going to put up a graphic of all the pure MGL reels and their spool weights, and as you can see, the Curado MGL 70 slots about right in the middle, just a little bit heavier than the METANIUM MGL. But check this out. Here's the spool of the old Curado 50, and this spool weighs only 11.3 grams. So much lighter than even the new MGL 70 spool. And that's what made the Curado 50 such an awesome reel, was that it gave you pretty much 99% of the performance of the much more expensive Core 50, but at almost half the cost. And a lot of people wish these reels would come back. Now before we pop these spools back in, I'm just going to check real quick to see if the new MGL spool will fit into the old reel, and yep, it looks like it does. So this might be a great upgrade for you guys that have the old 70 and you can't really find any kind of spools for it. Yep, seems to work. Now I'm not sure how much the spool is going to cost on its own though, and we really haven't found out if it's an actual performance upgrade, and that's going to come later. But yeah, it looks like the new spool will fit into the old reel with no problem. Okay, so it's pretty obvious that Shimano has made quite a few improvements and changes over the old model with this new MGL 70, particularly in my opinion that reduced spool weight. But it's time for the bad news. And the bad news is that the price has increased on this new model, and not by a little, it's increased by a lot. The price of this new model is now $230. So that is $30 more than the old model, and more importantly, $30 more than the competing DAIWA TATULA SV. Now I guess it's up to you whether all these changes, are worth the extra money, but I will tell you this. What you don't see on paper is that the smoothness and, more importantly, the refinement has gone up tremendously with this new model. The handle tolerance has gotten a lot better, and particularly the knob tolerance as well. And that's because I believe 2 of those extra 3-ball bearings were put into the knobs, so there is no wiggle or slop or play. And let me show you guys something. Now the old model, particularly my reel, was never very refined for a $200 reel. It's got no bearings in the knobs, so there's quite a bit of up and down and in and out play, and that's on both knobs. Hopefully you guys can see that. And the handle had a lot of in and out play as well. So it was a very noisy and clackety cranking experience. Let me see if I can demonstrate. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but the new reel once again has no play in the knobs, and there's no play in the handle as well. So when I do that, it's silent. So there's no loose parts just, crashing up against each other, making it very noisy and unrefined. It's very, very smooth and refined now versus the old reel. But like I said, once again, $30 price increase is quite a lot. And it kind of, takes this reel out of the price range of competing with DAIWA's TATULA SV, even though they are both, finesse versions of each model's line. So there we go, guys. The tabletop review of the new CURADO MGL 70. Now, of course, this is only half the story. The other half of the story is to see whether this new MGL spool is actually going to give us a casting and pitching performance increase over the old model, which was already a beast in both of those categories. So I'm going to string both of these reels up, and also I'm going to string up my old CURADO 50, and that's because I've always wondered whether the new CURADO 70 was a performance upgrade over the old CURADO 50, but I never went out and put it to the test. But now this gives me a chance to do that. Alright guys, so I'm going to see you out on the field and out on the water, and thanks a lot.